high income does not equal wealth. Every single one, their wealth came from ownership of asset. I will find a way. And I truly believe that. I believe that for most things in life, there is a way to succeed. I'm your host, Ayesha Ofori. I just remember one day thinking, what do I do? Like, what is my job? What is it that I do? And I was like, I help incredibly rich people get richer. Where are the women? Why don't women seem to have any money? And I literally went to work for several weeks with my resignation letter in my bag. And I remember I come home and my husband would say to me, have you resigned today? I was like, no, not today. We'll try again tomorrow. Building wealth has never just been about money. It's about decisions. It's about taking calculated risks and knowing how to make your strengths work for you. It's about navigating the moments that change everything. Welcome to the Femme Fortune podcast. I'm your host, Ayesha Ofori, and in this series, we unpack how women actually build wealth. Now, to wrap up season 1, I want to turn the tables a little bit. So I spend a lot of time asking other women how they've built their wealth, but I'm often asked about my own journey. So things like the decisions I've made, what I've learned working with ultra high net worth clients, what actually builds wealth in practice. So today, I'm answering those questions directly.
So let's start at the beginning. What did you grow up seeing or learning about money? And what impact do you think it's had on how you make financial decisions today?
Yeah, so I think that's a really important question. And when I look back at my life, I think the early days and my upbringing actually impacted everything else that followed quite a lot. So, I mean, I was born and raised in London, went to a primary state school. At some point, I think I was around 7, my mum moved me to a private school. She had a background in education. And I think for her, she realized that education was really important. And she felt that people could use it as kind of like a springboard, I guess, a better life. So I think for her, it was really, really important that I got a good education. So she worked like multiple jobs to be able to afford to send me to a private school. Back then, I didn't really think about money. I mean, I was like a kid, right? It's ironic because they say that your money habits are formed by age 7. So if I think of it like that, what were my experiences of money like up to age 7? I don't really remember there being any distinct ones. I think, we weren't wealthy. My mum always made a big effort to make sure that we had what we needed. I think the point in my life where I really became aware of money was when I went to secondary school. So I went to a private secondary school in Hampstead. Some of the children, came from very wealthy families. And I think, actually, I remember very clearly the point where I was suddenly like, wow, there are very big differences in terms of how people live. I remember going to like a play date with a friend, and she had a lift in her living room. And I remember thinking, this is like the lift that I see in the like shopping mall. She has one of these in her living room. Like, that's insane. And I think for the first time, it just opened my eyes in terms of just how people could live differently. Because I think up until that time, the only people I'd really been exposed to were, friends, family who came from a similar sort of socioeconomic background. So when everything around you looks the same, you just assume that everyone has that. And I think as I got older, but definitely through experiences at school, I realized that there were basically just 2 different worlds out there. There were people who were doing okay and, were getting by. And then there were people who had, extreme wealth, and their lives were very, very different. And I think for me, I guess the way that I kind of describe it sometimes is it was a bit like living on 2 different sides of the same coin. So on the one hand, I would, go to school or hang out with my friends and be surrounded by, a lot of wealth and that kind of life. But then I'd come home in the evenings and have a very different kind of life. So I say like my home life was one side of the coin, and, being with my friends, etc., was the other side of the coin. I guess with hindsight, it does do some things to you. I think on the positive side, it definitely, I think, started, I think, what I call my ambition, because I definitely remember at some point sort of saying, when I'm older, I want to be like them. I want to have what they have. I guess at a young age, you don't really know what that means, but I definitely remember at some point thinking, yeah, I want that. Not that I knew how to get that or had any idea of how to go about it, but it was kind of like in the back of my mind.
So you've always been ambitious, but what were you actually chasing early on? Was it success, security, money, or something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, ambition has changed over time. I'd say I've always been competitive. So I like to win, and I like to be, the best that I can possibly be. So whenever I try to do something, I make sure that I put my all in so I can be the best. And I've always been like that. So I think, when I was younger, I guess I was a bit, no, I was about to say I was a bit lucky. It wasn't luck. My mum spent a lot of time and effort, reading with me, doing maths with me and things like this. So by the time I got to school, I was doing very well academically. So being top of the class or near the top of the class actually came pretty easy for me. And then once I realized that I was at the top, I liked to stay there. So then I would work hard to make sure that I could stay at the top of the class. And I think that kind of mindset in terms of being the best or being at the top has stayed with me throughout, whether it be, sports and wanting to be fantastic at that, or whether it's academics. I'd say that sort of competitiveness as well drove my ambition. And I'd say, when I was younger, yeah, I wasn't really focused on money or anything like that. It was just being number one. And number two wasn't good enough. I think when I started to work and actually have a career, then my definition of ambition changed. It wasn't necessarily being number one, but it was achieving whatever goal it was that I had decided that I had set for that particular phase of my life or that particular career, for example.
You went into investment banking and then private wealth. Why that path? And at the time, did you believe that was how you build wealth?
So I fell into investment banking. I studied maths and sciences at A level. I studied physics at Imperial College, so for undergrad. I also got a master's in physics, and then I had wanted to do a PhD, also in physics. But my mum sort of said to me, like, what on earth are you doing? You're racking up all this student debt. Like, go and get a job and start earning some money. And she was like, what do physicists do anyway? Like, why couldn't you have been a doctor or an accountant or, something useful? And I think for me, I just love numbers so much. And I had so many questions about, I guess, the universe and how the world worked. And I thought that if I went to university and I studied physics, I'd get the answers to all of these questions. And I remember my mum said to me once, she's like, why do you sit here thinking about, all these things about the world and how the universe works? She's like, people have real world problems. Like, there are bills to pay. You need to stop focusing on that abstract stuff and live in the real world and go get a job. And then I was at university one day, and a whole group of my friends were sort of running to an event because a lot of companies would come onto campus to talk about different careers and things like this. At this point, I was still insisting I was going to do my PhD. But my friends were like, oh, just, come with us anyway. It's lunchtime. You're not really doing anything else. And this particular company was giving out free popcorn makers. So yeah, giving away my age here, but this was back in the day before you could buy popcorn in a bag. So I went along to get this popcorn maker so that I could actually put the popcorn seeds in and make my own popcorn. As a student, anything free was a plus. So I go to this event, and it was a presentation by a company called Credit Suisse. They don't exist anymore, but they were an investment bank. I had no idea that they were an investment bank. I think I even said to my friend, what do they do? Make cheese or something? Because that's what it sounded like to me. And she actually looked at me horrified because she had wanted to be a banker. And she's like, no, it's an investment bank. I had no idea what that meant. But I remember sitting through the presentation. And the thing that struck me most about that was at some point they sort of said, if you join us, you could be on, I think they said a salary of something like £60,000 or something like this. Now, back in the day, that's a lot of money, particularly for somebody like, I was a student. I wasn't really earning any money. I had a lot of student debt. I was like, oh my gosh, if I went to like this company or another company like this and I was earning £60,000, I'd be able to pay off my student debts. And also like my mum would be over the moon. The other thing that drew me to it, and I think this links back to the point I mentioned earlier about being competitive. At that time, investment banking was like the most sought after industry. So I remember thinking, okay, well, if this is the industry that everyone wants to get into, then I want to get into the industry. But not only that, I want to go to the best bank in the industry and get the best job. So I remember I went home, I did a lot of Googling, a lot of searching, started to look up actually what an investment bank was, literally made a list of the top 10 investment banks, applied to all of them to do an internship, got offers at all of them, but was deciding between number one and number two. And back then, in my mind, number one was Goldman Sachs and number two was Morgan Stanley. I actually ended up going to Morgan Stanley because they were just a lot nicer in the sense that they were actually wooing me. So they were taking me out for nice dinners. They were sending me emails. I was getting phone calls like, are you going to accept? Are you going to join? Are you going to join? Whereas Goldman didn't do any of that. It was like they sent you the email acceptance and I never heard from them. It was just accept by this date or not. So then I was kind of like, well, the guys at Morgan Stanley seem to actually care. So maybe I should go there rather than Goldman. So I joined Morgan Stanley in investment banking, M&A. This was ages ago now, sort of pre-2008, pre-financial crisis. When I say banking was great, it was with hindsight, it was brutal. I was working insane hours. Let's say you get into work, I don't know, 8:30, 9. Most of the time I would work until 2, 3 a.m. Like as standard, 7 days a week. You would work weekends as well. I don't even think I took a holiday in my time that I was there. Most of my holidays got cancelled, or I would end up having to take my laptop anyway. So I think I actually got to a point where I stopped booking holidays because it's actually really depressing if you have to cancel your holiday last minute, or you've just got to like sit on a beach and work the whole time. So I stopped booking holidays so I wouldn't get disappointed when they got messed up. The thing about banking though is, as brutal as the hours were, it allowed me to learn so many things about myself that I think absolutely helped like shape the person that I am today. So it's a bit like boot camp, right? It really pushes you to your extreme limits. And I think that a lot of people don't even know where their limits are because they've never been pushed to them. Whereas I know, for example, that I can stay awake for like 36 hours without going to sleep before I start to go a bit doolally. And I know that sounds crazy, but it does mean that I can work a bit more and push more and go the extra mile because I know that I have it in me because my limits have been tested before. Yeah, so that was how I got into banking. Once the financial crisis kind of happened, it just wasn't the place to be. Like Morgan Stanley was literally next door to Lehman Brothers. So when Lehman went down, I remember that day so clearly. It was just, it was almost a bit like out of a movie. It was just so depressing. And then there were knock-on effects at other banks, and literally you'd come in sometimes and, see people with their boxes packing up all their stuff and being marched out of the office by security. And I just remember thinking at that time, like, yeah, banking just isn't the place to be. So I'm going to leave. Let me take some time out. But being the person that I am, like, I was never going to go traveling. So I decided to do an MBA, went to London Business School, signed up for their 2-year MBA program, like 2 of the best years of my life, like absolutely phenomenal. And I think being at business school, it just opened my eyes to so many things and just showed me like what opportunity was out there and that there was so much more to life than banking. I think if someone had said to me like pre-MBA, like, Ayesha, what is success look like to you? What is the holy grail? I would have said like being partner at, Goldman Sachs, because it's, number one, at least in my mind. And but when I got to business school, I was like, hold on a second. Like, so many people here, most of the people here aren't bankers, but they're super successful. They have amazing careers. They're earning well. And so for the first time, I was like, wow, there's actually like something outside of investment banking. So I did start to think about like, I don't know, what I could possibly do with my life once I finished my MBA. But little did I know, I started my MBA in July 2010, I think. Yeah, because I graduated 2012. So I started July 2010. And then by like October, the careers office was sort of saying to me, like, where's your CV? And I was like, what do you mean, where's my CV? And they're like, yeah, we need your CV for the CV book so it can be ready by January so you can start applying for internships. So you can get an internship next summer and then that internship will get you a job. And I remember thinking like, I've only been here a few months. I have no idea what I want to do. I came here because I thought I was going to get like a 2-year break, well, not a break, but like 2 years to think about what I wanted to do with my life. Like, I've only been here a few months. I have no idea. And they kept pushing and pushing and pushing and insisting I had to have the CV. So I just created my CV and it was a banking CV because that was all I'd ever done at that time. Because it was a banking CV, it meant that the companies that were interested in me were banks. So ironically, I thought I was going to business school to get an opportunity to kind of like find myself, but ended up just applying for banking internships because that was all I knew at that point. And I got the internship at Goldman Sachs. And yes, it was deliberate. Even though I'd gone to Morgan Stanley before business school, there was always something in the back of my mind. It's like, you chose number 2. You had the option to go to number 1 and you didn't do it. So I knew I would go to Goldman at some point. Maybe it was to scratch that itch, but the fact that I didn't go to the firm that I thought was number 1, that stayed with me. So yeah, for me, looking back, it was inevitable that I was going to go to Goldman. I got the internship, did the summer internship there, and then got the full-time offer to join Goldman Sachs as an ultra high net wealth advisor once I'd graduated from my MBA. So was my whole sort of banking career planned out? Absolutely not. As I said, I almost fell into a job or didn't fall into a job at Morgan Stanley. I did apply, but I only did it because my mum was harassing me about paying off debts. And then I ended up applying to Goldman because the careers office at LBS were pushing me to submit a CV and banking was all I knew. So I wouldn't say it was a conscious choice, but I don't think that really mattered for me because, again, the type of person that I am, whether I choose to do something or not, or I'm in a situation, I'm going to give it all my all and I'm going to deliver. So I knew that, yeah, whether it would be banking or something else, I would always push to make sure that I succeed or I'm successful by whatever definitions I have or the people around me have in terms of that role.
You advised ultra high net worth clients and managed over £500 million. What did you see wealthy people doing differently that most people wouldn't expect? What actually builds wealth at that level?
Yeah, so my time at Goldman was really interesting. In the summer before I started, I did an internship. And the whole point of an internship is to basically prove to the company that you're good enough for them to hire you. So during that summer, I think it's about 8 weeks, I had to essentially prove to Goldman why they should hire me full-time to start the following year once I'd finished my MBA as an ultra high net wealth advisor. So first of all, an ultra high net wealth advisor is somebody at Goldman anyway. In different banks, the role varies slightly, but at Goldman, the role is you have basically 2 parts to your job. You have to go out and find clients being very wealthy people. When I was there, the minimum account size at Goldman was $10 million or £10 million. And so any client that you went out to find, you had to, convince them to give you at least 10 million to manage on their behalf. Not just go and find the clients. At Goldman, you also got to manage the money. So at some other firms, they separate the role. So there are some people who go out and find the clients and all they do is look after the clients. And then there are some banks where there are other groups who manage the money. At Goldman, the role was combined. And that suited me because I love talking. I'm a people person, but I also love numbers and maths. So like the managing the money and the investing part, that really excited me as well. So during this internship, I put together like a strategy and a proposal about what it was I would do if they hired me, and sort of like mapped out a path that I said that I would follow to be successful. Now, clearly it worked because they hired me and I got the job. But I remember like my first day and the first sort of week that I was there, I sat at my desk, I looked at this proposal that I had created, and I realized like practically I can't implement this. Like I tried to, like, it sort of said something like, okay, here are all the wealthy people I know. I'm going to call them because they know me. They're going to become clients. And then I'll start with them and then they'll refer me and introduce other people and blah, blah, blah. I tried it. It didn't work. I called the wealthy people that I knew, which weren't that many because at that point in my life, I didn't know many people who had 10 million plus. The few that I did know, I called them and they sort of said to me like, Ayesha, we love you, but you're not a wealth manager. Like you've been there, what, 3 days? Like, what do you know about building wealth? And I remember like hanging up the phone thinking, oh my gosh, like they're right. Like if roles were reversed, I wouldn't give them my money either. You've been in the job for 3 days. Like, what do you know? It's a bit like when you, I don't know, you go to the hospital for something and then the senior doctor says, hey, we have some juniors and some interns. Can they do it? And I don't know about everyone else, but in my head, I'm like, oh, I'd really rather they didn't. If they're juniors, like they probably don't know what they're doing. So I could relate to what these people were saying to me. Like, why would they want me managing their money at that point, given I was so new into the role? And so I looked at this strategy document that I'd created and I was just like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? I can't implement this, but they've hired me. They're expecting me to bring in hundreds of millions of pounds. Like, how the hell am I going to do this? And I literally remember like sitting there, like panicking in a bit, like, oh my gosh, like shit, what am I going to do? And then once I calmed down, I was like, okay, just be strategic about it. I was like, right, what is the end goal? Where am I? What do I need to get there? And what, I guess, tools do I have? Like, what things do I have that I can leverage to help me? And I think one thing or two things that really helped me is one, I'm quite strategic. Like I'm very good at sort of mapping things out and figuring out, what I need to get to certain places. But also that, I don't know, ambition, that competitiveness, whatever you call it, I wasn't going to fail. So I knew I would figure it out. I would do whatever it takes to get it to work. And I just knew that about myself. So once I'd reminded myself of that, I calmed down, I stopped freaking out and I was like, right, come up with a plan. We're going to get this to work. And I did, right? I ended up staying at Goldman for over 6 years. I built my book from zero to over £500 million that I managed across various different asset classes. I was promoted. I had, a good successful career at Goldman. And when I think back to that, that first day or those early days sitting there like, oh my God, now I laugh about it. But I think there's one thing that I always now remind myself sometimes is that I will find a way. And I truly believe that. I believe that for most things in life, there is a way to succeed. It's just about, do you have the determination? Do you have the willpower? You need to have this drive where you're never going to give up. I sort of describe it as, if I'm in a race and something happens and I don't know, my leg was blown off or something, I'm the sort of person that would pick that blown up leg off and hop on the other leg. That's the sort of person I am. If I set my mind to do something, I will deliver. The only time I won't deliver if it is physically not possible and I cannot do it. And even then, I think it will probably take me a long time to stop trying and actually accept that it's not possible. That's just the person that I am. And I think that kind of mindset that I have has definitely shaped, various sort of points and journeys in my life. And I guess has helped me to get to where I am today.
What did you see wealthy people doing differently that most people wouldn't expect? And what actually builds wealth at that level?
So I think for me, I had the view that you get a job, you work really hard, you climb the career ladder, you get paid more, and you become successful that way. I definitely thought that going into Goldman Sachs. I thought, if I get a job here, I'm going to be paid well. I will work my ass off. I will deliver, and my salary will increase and I will be wealthy. I don't think that's how it works anywhere, to be honest. I don't think salaries make you wealthy. Absolutely, they are a tool and you can use them to help you build wealth, but salaries in themselves do not make you wealthy. High income does not equal wealth. I realized that directly when I would look at sort of how my clients were building wealth. And what I realized is that all of them, every single one, their wealth came from ownership of assets. Now, the assets would vary. It could be real estate. It could be a company. It could be, I don't know, anything, wild and wacky things. I've seen a lot of things. But fundamentally, the core of building wealth comes from asset ownership. It does not come from just having a high salary or income. As I've said, absolutely, you can use that income and you can use that salary to build wealth, but they are not the same. And I think for me, actually being around very wealthy people, seeing how they'd build their wealth, realized that they weren't salaried employees. And then also just looking within the firm and looking at the number of employees that were there, the salaries that everybody's on, and then sort of thinking about the number that to me sort of signified wealth, and thinking, okay, well, how many people in this firm are earning that salary? Maybe a tiny handful, maybe 5 people, if that. So what I actually realized is, hold on a second, it doesn't matter like how hard I work or what I do here, unless I end up being like the CEO or the CFO, which, I mean, I was realistic. That is not going to happen. I'm not going to be able to earn what I think, significant wealth is to me. And so that was another sort of like light bulb moment for me, like staying here, working my ass off, climbing the ladder. Yes, I'll make money, but that is not going to get me to the wealth. And so it was when I was in Goldman managing money for other people, one day I was sort of like, this is crazy. Day in, day out, I am literally managing wealth for the world's wealthiest people, or most of my clients were UK, so the UK's wealthiest people, but I'm not doing anything with my own money. And I went to my now husband, but then boyfriend at the time, and he was also a banker at a different firm. And I sort of said to him, what are you doing with your money? You're on a good salary. Where does your cash go? And both of us at that time had our cash in the bank. And I literally said to him, I was like, this is crazy. We are both bankers. As bankers, we know that the worst place that you can put your money is in cash in the bank. And I was like, this is insane. Like, we have to do something about it. So at that point, I was like, right, I want to start investing. And how I looked at investing at that point was definitely shaped by what I saw in terms of my clients and how they built wealth. So when my very first investment was into real estate. Why? Because it was asset ownership. I personally didn't go into stocks and shares and things like that. And I think that's because my risk tolerance is and has always been very high. Again, I think it's sort of me saying, right, if I'm going to do this, I'm aiming for the freaking moon. So I want things that are aggressive, that I think will grow, that give me that chance of, knocking the ball out of the park. And as I said, I saw with my clients, they went for assets. So I'm like, right, I want assets. And it's funny because when I first started investing in property, I knew absolutely nothing about it, but I taught myself. And the reason that I even thought of property in the first place was because there was a colleague of mine at the time who'd started investing in real estate herself. And it's really funny because she would come into work some days with like, I don't know, a Rolex watch or a like really new expensive handbag. And I remember thinking like, how on earth can you afford these things? Like, I know your salary because your salary is the same as my salary. Like, how are you buying these things? And she was like, oh yeah, I got a property portfolio. And I was like, what's that? How does that work? And I mean, at the time, she tried to dissuade me from going into property, actually. Told me that, I'd missed the market and that, it was going to crash. And if I got in, it was a terrible time and this, that. And I sort of said to her, look, it doesn't matter. Please teach me anyway. And she was just like, no, there's no point. And I was like, whatever, I'll go teach myself. And that's exactly what I did. And then I started building a property portfolio, which to this day is, I'd say, the largest proportion of my wealth. And if I didn't have that property portfolio, there is no way I would have been able to have done half the things I have done in my life since that point, because that property portfolio gave me like a foundation or a safety net, if you like. So there are various things that I was able to later do in my life because I didn't have to worry about money, because I knew I had this property portfolio that was generating income. Now, things have changed. I started that property portfolio like over 10 years ago. Like, property just isn't the same today. So I don't necessarily think I would have been able to start today and build the property portfolio in the same way. The UK government just taxes you insanely today. And I think property just doesn't work as well, particularly because of the tax and the various regulations and other things that have come in. But absolutely, for me, I think I got in at a time that was good. I managed to build it, maintain it, and it absolutely has given me that safety net. Probably wouldn't have done it had I not been exposed to the clients and the wealth that I was at Goldman Sachs. I think it's almost that saying, right? You've got to see it to believe it. But more than that, I think you've got to see it to think or to believe that you can actually do it. I think it's very difficult, or very few people will have this mindset to do something if they've never, ever, ever seen it. I think you need to be exposed to it in some way. It doesn't have to be directly. It doesn't have to be like, first person relationships, but I think you need to be able to see it somewhere for it to trigger something in your brain to be like, oh my gosh, yeah, I could do that. Because that's definitely what happened to me.
So you left a very successful career at Goldman Sachs. Why? What were you really optimizing for at that point?
So I left Goldman for a number of reasons. I remember I had been promoted. Things were going really well. And I guess it was kind of just a moment where I sort of thought, okay, like, what do the next sort of 6 to 10 years look like? And I realized it was just more of the same. Just go out, get more clients, get more assets. So I think at this point, I had the sort of $500 million of assets under management. And then I realized it's just go get another $500 million or get $1 billion, get $2 billion. But my job is exactly the same. So the way I get the clients, the way I manage the clients, none of that changes. And I got to a point where I could, help clients create portfolios and different strategies and things like in my sleep. And so I wasn't being challenged anymore. And I didn't feel that I was learning that much new things. But I say the crucial thing, or the main driver as to why I left, was I lost my sense of purpose. I'm a very purpose-driven person. I need to have a reason to get out of bed every morning. And it needs to be something that I believe in and that I can get behind. And I don't know at what point I lost that purpose there, but I just remember one day thinking, what do I do? Like, what is my job? What is it that I do? And I was like, I help incredibly rich people get richer. And I was like, okay, like, wealthy people do need help managing their money. Absolutely fine. But for me, I'm like, I don't think I necessarily want to be that person. I want to help people who I feel need the help more. So people who aren't insanely wealthy, who want to build wealth or who need to build wealth. I just felt that would be a much better use of my time and actually just make me feel better about what it was that I was doing. If I'm going to work hard and work evenings and work weekends, then it needs to matter. And I had one particular client who was a pain. There's always one. And I remember he'd had a phenomenal year and, his portfolio was up an insane amount. And I remember feeling really good with myself about it. And I remember going to his review meeting and he was just like, meh, yeah. And I was in my head, I was like, what do you mean, meh? Do you know how much time and effort? Do you know how many dinners with friends I had to miss because I was working to help you build wealth? And you're just like, meh. It was that was a key turning point for me. And I was like, I have to do something else. I need to do something where people, the end people value what it is that I'm doing. You know, maybe I'm not going to help someone make, I don't know, 5 million, 10 million. If I only help someone make, I don't know, 50,000 pounds, 100,000 pounds, if that money is life-changing for them or just move the needle in a meaningful way for them, that is a much better use of my time. And I would feel better about that than making, 10 million for somebody who goes, meh. So by this point in my head, I was like, yeah, I've got to go. The third thing and the final thing that tipped me over the edge is there was somebody quite senior at Goldman. He's still there now. I absolutely love him. He's such a great person and hilarious. And I remember going up to him. I was about to say his name, but I won't do that. I remember going up to him and I sort of said to him, you've been here for, I don't know, 10, 15 years, however long it was. Like, why have you stayed? And he said something to me like, well, where am I going to go, Ayesha? I've got a wife, I've got 3 kids. My wife doesn't work. My 3 kids are in private school. I've got a holiday home here, a holiday home there. And I remember realizing this guy is stuck. He's not necessarily here because he loves his job and he feels passionate about it, whatever. It's almost like he's trapped and he can't leave. And you hear people talk about this thing called golden handcuffs, where, the outside world think, oh, you have an amazing job, you're earning so much money, your life is fantastic. But actually, what I realized for a lot of bankers or a lot of people who earn well, if your lifestyle is expensive, then there's not necessarily any excess money left, but also you get kind of stuck in the system because you have to keep funding that lifestyle if you want to keep it. And so, even if you get to a point where you're unhappy and you want to leave, you have to stay because you need that money every month. And I think that was kind of where he was. He sort of said to me, where am I going to go? And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, that is not going to be me. I am not going to stay here for that to happen to me. And I'm not saying it happens to everyone, but that was his particular situation. And it just really hit home for me. So at that point, I was like, okay, I need to do something else. I want to stay in the wealth space. I want to help people build wealth, but I want to help people who need it. There are so many people out there who aren't investing, who aren't putting their money to work, who will get to retirement age and suddenly be like, oh my God, I don't have enough money. There are even what I call sort of mass affluent. So people who have some wealth, they're not sort of 10 million wealthy, but who have some money and it sits in cash. And whenever I hear these stories, I'm like, oh my God, I know that there are people out there like that who need help. And so I sort of said, okay, that's what I want to do. I want to leave to help people who need it more. I want to stay in the same sector. I love what I do. Goldman, thought I was good at what I did. They promoted me, so I assume they must have. And so I was like, right, I'm going to leave and I'm going to focus on something like that. And then I kind of took it a step further. Then I was like, okay, but what exactly am I going to do? And there were 2 things that really stood out for me. One was that most of the wealthy people that I had come across didn't look like me. And so I started to think okay, well, where are the Black people with wealth? And also the second thing was where are the women? Why don't women seem to have any money? Why are most of the clients men? And initially I thought it was just a Goldman thing, but it's not. I did some research. I looked across the industry. And what I found actually is that whether you are looking at a top end wealth manager or you're looking at a retail investment platform, majority of the customers tend to be men. So then I was like, what the hell? Where are the women? Why don't women seem to have any money? And if women do have money, why aren't they investing it? What I found out is that as women, we are great at holding cash. We squirrel it away and it's okay, the cash is there and it's sort of we can see it, so it's safe. Everyone needs to hold some cash. but holding too much cash hurts you. And not only that, that excess cash that you don't need to live day to day or for emergencies needs to be invested. And what I also learned is that women do want to invest. So contrary to like what people used to say, oh, if women aren't investing, they're not interested, they don't want to do it. No, we do want to invest. We do want to build wealth. We do want to empower ourselves. But we have so many hurdles and more obstacles that we have to overcome before we feel comfortable to do it than men. Men are more likely to sort of just jump in and see how it goes. Whereas, what the research I did found is as women, we're just not like that. And that's fine. But then it means that we have to work on overcoming those barriers and overcoming those hurdles. And so I was like, okay, I can do that. I can help these people. I can help women to overcome the hurdles that they have so that they can start investing and actually, build wealth for themselves. So when all those things kind of came together, then I was like, okay, I know what I've got to do. I'm going to leave Goldman and I'm going to build something to help women build wealth. And I remember being like, yeah, okay, I figured it out. I know what I'm going to do. Literally took me forever to resign. Despite the fact that I knew what I wanted to do, I was so institutionalized and so used to working for a corporate and going to work every day. It was so hard to leave. Also because my identity had been tied up with my role. I had worked there for so long. Everyone knew me as the Goldman banker. Part of me, I had these little doubts in my head that's like, if you leave, who are you? What are you? You don't have the prestigious title anymore. What are you going to do? Who are you going to be? You're not going to be anything. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, can I actually do this? Can I leave? And it didn't help that my mom was like, oh my God, you want to leave? Why would you do that? You've worked so hard your whole life to do this. And now you want to give it up to, start this thing that's just an idea in your head. And so it was really tough for me actually, because I was having doubts anyway. So then to have other people put doubts into my mind just made it even harder. And I literally went to work for several weeks with my resignation letter in my bag. And I remember I come home and my husband would say to me, have you resigned today? I was like, no, not today. We'll try again tomorrow. Next day, Ayesha, have you resigned today? No, not today. We'll try again tomorrow. And then the point I actually did resign, I literally went into my boss's office, chucked the letter on his desk and just ran out. I was just like, I can't talk to him. If he tries to persuade me to stay or say something, at that point, I wasn't strong enough to probably resist. So I just ran out. Actually, that is what happened. Then he's like, oh my gosh, I read this. Why do you want to go? There's so much opportunity for you here and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, look, I could stay and I could try and fight my way to the top and it would be a fight. I'm down with that. I'm up for a fight if I have to fight, but I could take that effort and energy and I could put that into something else and have so much more impact. Even though I hadn't figured out the details of what that other thing was going to be at that point, I backed myself. And so I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to go. In my head, there were still these doubts, absolutely. But the thing that kind of sealed it for me was the next day, one of my clients called me and offered me a job. And I sort of said to him, but you work in that industry. I'm thinking of staying in the investing money, wealth management space. That's not what you do. So how can you offer me a job? He's like, I don't care. We'll find you a role. Just come and work for me. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, if he sees something in me and he's willing to find a role for me, then worst case scenario, I can get a job. I can just get a job in another bank or somewhere else. This fear I have of if I leave then and it doesn't work out, that everything crumbles, that went away. So then I was like, right, I'm going to do this. And yeah, I resigned and went off to build Propel.
You built Propel to change how women engage in investing. What's been harder about building a company than you expected?
Loaded question. Oh my gosh. What's been harder? Absolutely everything. And I literally mean that. I had never been a founder before. I'd never started a business. As I said, I'd been a banker for 10 years. I didn't know what to expect. And I think potentially that's a good thing, because I think if I had known what it was like, I might not have done it. I think in the early days, the hardest thing was just knowing what to do, right? So I remember like, I don't know, day one of Propel, like I'm a team of one, it's just me. So like, okay, what do you do? You know, when I was in banking, there was a structure. You know, you had emails, you had meetings to go to, like other people would put things in your diary. I remember I was like, okay, there's nothing in my diary. No one's going to put anything in my diary. I don't have any employees. Like, what do I do? So I went back to one of the things that I do well. I strategized. I was like, okay, right, where am I today? Where is it that I'm trying to get to? What are the various different paths that can take me there? What do I feel is the path of least resistance? What things do I need to travel on that path of least resistance? But most importantly, who do I need to help me? So one of the things that I've realized in life is you're successful because of people. No man is an island, or whatever that phrase is. Like, you can't do everything by yourself. So it's about being able to identify the right people at the right time to help you do the things that you needed. So I actually started to map out who it was that I needed to help me progress with the business. So I'd say that was kind of the first obstacle that I came across, but I overcome. And then since then, I mean, there's been so many more. You know, I am a solo founder, right? So I am the CEO, the CFO, the CMO, the C everything, because I didn't have a co-founder. Over time, I, obviously brought people into the business. But when you are the sole founder, you feel this weight and this responsibility for absolutely everything. And to be frank, over time, it becomes exhausting. But you keep going and you keep pushing because of that mission, because of that vision that you have for the business. And that is the thing that keeps you going. But for me, looking at everything altogether, three challenges that are big. One is regulation. So operating in the sort of money investing space, if you want to build a platform like I did with Propel, then it has to be FCA regulated. Operating within a regulated structure is insanely difficult. And I say that because there are companies out there who have similar missions to what I had at Propel in terms of like financially empowering women, etc. But they stayed, purely focused on education. So they didn't actually go into the investment part, so they didn't need to be regulated. But because we were regulated, absolutely every single thing we did was scrutinized. Or, for example, every single social media post has to go through compliance. And it sounds like, oh, that's so easy. Just send it to a compliance person, let them sign off. No. The way that we worked and a lot of new startups in the fintech sector work is you don't actually have the license or the regulated license yourself in the beginning. You essentially borrow it from another company, and that company oversees everything that you do because it's basically their license that you're using. So if something goes wrong, it's their license. So obviously they don't want to jeopardize that. So they're on top of everything. Even the process to get a social media post approved could take 3 days, sometimes longer. It's actually very prohibitive in terms of innovation and speed, which are the things that you need when you're a startup. So very difficult to operate in a regulated environment. Second thing, fundraising. I had heard the stories, right? I knew that women don't get funded. I think the statistic is something like only 2% of female founders get VC funding. For Black women, it's even less. 0.02% of Black women got VC funding. The type of business that I was building needed that sort of VC capital. I was definitely naive. I felt that for whatever reason, that didn't apply to me. So I was sort of like, okay, I've got physics degree from Imperial College, MBA from London Business School, worked at Morgan Stanley, worked at Goldman Sachs, have some networks. Surely those statistics don't apply to me. They did, absolutely. And it was a shock for me. Fundraising was incredibly hard and very difficult. And I think made even more difficult by the fact that I was a solo founder, because fundraising is like a full-time job, right? So there was me fundraising pretty much every day, but then also having to run this company, manage the people, and do all that side of things. And I made it work. Why? Because that's what I do. When I set out to do something, I deliver. But it meant like working pretty much round the clock. Again, not a problem for me because I was used to working those kind of hours in banking. But with hindsight, when I look back on it all, I'm like, it was insane. Like, it was absolutely nuts. That said, I did get such a thrill from seeing the progress, from seeing, how I took an idea out of my head, built a team around me, got investors on board, and actually built a platform that was changing women's lives and, helping them to become more confident and comfortable with money and investing, and actually going ahead and taking action and investing. And that bit was a crucial bit for me. So many people talk about, I don't know, learning and workshops and reading this, reading that, yada, yada, yada. Yes, you need to do that. But at the end of the day, if you don't take action and you don't actually start investing, then it doesn't matter how much knowledge building you're doing, because that is not the part that ultimately builds your wealth, right? So for me, having that investment piece, of Propel, that was the main thing, because that's actually women taking action and investing. And we had amazing results with it. Our conversion rates were insane. 10 to 15% of everyone who was registering on our platform were actually going ahead, opening an investment account and actually investing. And if you compare that to the industry average, which is between 1 to 3%, like, we were absolutely killing it. So then you might think, oh my gosh, like the investor funds would have been flooding in with like such amazing metrics. No. And like, it surprises me. Like I just the whole thing is insane. But, I got told so many times, oh, you're a solo founder, that's very risky. I got told, you're building a platform for women that's not a big enough market. I got told women don't want to invest because if they did, they'd be doing it already. You're not AI. Everybody's only interested in AI at the moment. And I was like, I totally understand AI is, the thing of the moment, but this is something that is needed. Not only is it needed, we've proven that there is something there, that women want this. And it just didn't matter. Like, fundraising, still incredibly, incredibly difficult. So I'd say those were the biggest challenges.
At some point, you made the decision to step back from the regulated investment side. What led to that decision, and what did you realize about where your real leverage is?
Yeah, this is something that I've literally decided on like the last few days. So it's still it's still something I'm processing. Like, Propel is literally my third baby. It's like my child. As I said, like, the regulated part, I think, is absolutely needed because ultimately women need to invest. And, you might say, okay, there are so many other investment platforms out there, they can just go and use those. They weren't. Those platforms have been out there since day dot, right? And as I said at the beginning, majority of their customers were men. Women were not actively using those platforms. They're not designed for women. They don't think about investing in the way that women think about investing. They don't help women overcome the hurdles that they have before they feel comfortable to invest. In my opinion, that's what our research showed. So the Propel platform was different because it was directly addressing those hurdles and getting women to invest. And as I said, our metrics showed that. But ultimately, because of the regulation, because of the nature of the business, it's expensive to run. And you don't make significant revenue from a business that is purely based on investing until several years down the line, when you have, lots of assets built up, hundreds of millions and things like this. Like, just to put it into context, right? Let's say somebody came on the Propel platform and invested £10,000 for a year. The revenue Propel would make from that is £50 over the year, £50. So imagine how many customers you need and how much money they would have to invest for the business to generate significant revenue. Now, it does happen and it is possible, but it takes time. And until that time, you need funding in the business to allow you to get there. And the market right now just wasn't prepared to give us the funding. So I took the decision that we have to pause the investment part of the business because we just cannot afford to keep operating that. But my mission is the same. Like, I know I'm meant to do this. I know I am meant to help women become more confident and comfortable with money and to build wealth. So for me, it was like, right, okay, if the investment platform is not the way to do it, there must be another way. I don't know what that way is yet, but I definitely plan to keep, sharing content, sharing what I know, and keeping the community alive, because that's also so important for women, to show them that, you're not alone and there are other women absolutely like you. And also, this is something that we can do together. You don't have to do this alone. But as I said, the investment side of the business, we are, parking that, closing it, call it what you will.
So, what are you building now?
Yeah, what's next for me? A lot of people have been asking me this in the last couple of days. No idea. Honestly, no idea. I'm going to wait for divine intervention. I will obviously keep doing the podcast. I love that. I will keep putting out content on my social media. I actually have been approached by a couple of the biggest financial institutions in the country to potentially work with them around how they can engage women. So this is the irony, right? Investors are like, oh, it's not something we can invest in for whatever reason, but yet these big institutions are still coming to me because they realize the value. It's just so frustrating. Anyway, I'm happy to have those conversations because I want to help. As I said, I'm still passionate about this mission. So yeah, I have no plans to start another startup. I think I need to go to therapy first, and overcome all my trauma. But I absolutely want to stay in the space, and will help women in whatever way I can.
Okay, so now for a taste of your own medicine with the Femme Fortune 5.
Oh gosh, I forgot about that. Okay, go for it.
Okay. As you know, you answer these questions quickly, no overthinking.
Okay.
High income or asset ownership?
Asset ownership.
Corporate career or entrepreneurship?
Entrepreneurship, despite the trauma.
Security or freedom?
Freedom.
Playing it safe or taking calculated risks?
Oh, I am a risk taker all day, every day.
Building for now or building for the long term?
Long term. Oh my gosh. It's so funny. I'm used to being the guest on podcasts, but then obviously launched my own podcast and got used to being the host. And now being the guest again, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is exhausting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. There we go.